Next level. Next level.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? I see we got Wayne Taylor, Michael Spencer. Wow. Greg M. and Harvey trying to solder with what? Using a cheap USB microscope. I gave up an eyeball there. Okay, I'm assuming that's like a charging port or something like that, right? So today I had planned to do a live repair, but I still have to pick up one additional camera, and something interesting happened last week. And for those of you that were here on Thursday evening, I was kind of talking about how we need to just bring some awareness to customers, you know, regardless of which side you are on as far as manufacturers, if you're a fanboy or not, or you favor one operating system or a company over the other, that's all fine. But what's important, I believe, is that people understand their options and are able to make an educated decision as far as their next course of action. You know, we certainly shouldn't make it difficult for people to say, well, I can go here to the manufacturer and pay $700 for a repair, or I can go over here to someone else and I can pay $75. And obviously, there are some implications that come along with that. You know, if you're not going to the authorized service center, you might not expect to have the same exact outcome. But that's not necessarily going to be a bad thing if you take a look at the work that has been done, you know, by warranty repair service centers, traditionally speaking. And one of the good examples that comes to mind is a relative of mine that worked for an automobile dealer, and a conversation I saw recently where people were saying, hey, listen, if you want to get your car fixed, how do you avoid terrible mechanics in places that are going to upsell you and try to get you to spend extra money that you don't need to? And the short answer to that question is word of mouth referrals from other people who have had a good experience and not been ripped off, because there's a lot of that going on out there in the world. You know, you go in for something simple that should cost you $50, and a lot of industries will try to convince you that you need to replace the entire engine. You know, this is the example that was made. If you have a bad spark plug, you don't change out the whole engine. You don't need to do that. If you are low on a coolant fluid, you don't have to rebuild the entire air conditioning system. All you have to do is refill, recharge it. And there are places who will have an incentive to get you to spend more money. And we're kind of seeing that, move over into our industry. So last Thursday, I was talking about this, how we really need to have people be aware of their options when it comes to repairs. And surprisingly, on Friday, Rossman, who, if you're not familiar with his channel, you should definitely take a look. I put a link down in the video description. I'll talk about it a little bit more later on. But he published a video about how a bunch of his batteries for laptops, MacBooks, were confiscated by customs. Now, I don't think it was ICE. I think it's actually another part of that organization. And there's a bunch of stuff all over the internet about it. I'm going to put some screenshots on here so you can see it. But I, for one, am happy that he's getting the kind of exposure that he is. He's bringing this to people's attention. Now, there are a few issues as far as, the way that he went about it, and some of the details are questionable, and that's causing a lot of controversy, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that to get people talking about this is the most important factor that it is. Again, regardless of which side you take, when we have this conversation, it will help to educate people. And as bored as I am of the whole outrage culture thing, it's like everyone's upset about something crazy. Maybe this will be one of those situations where it works in our favor. So I am curious to hear all of your comments and questions. I want to go into more detail about this. So let's get this thing started. And let me take a look here at the comments real quick. I don't want to get behind. Now, meanwhile, if you do get a chance, let's see, I'm going to see on my left, if you go over here to repair.org. I think the number one question, hopefully from this video, will be, well, what can we really do about it? Well, here's a start. You can go to this website, and they have a lot of resources and a lot of information that will point you in the right direction. The second answer is probably let your Congress people in your state know how you feel about this, whether that's writing them a letter, making a phone call, signing a petition, whatever it is. You need to let these people know that if you want my vote, you need to represent the best interests of consumers and not just large corporations. If you happen to be on the consumer side, some people aren't, and it's obvious by a lot of these conversations online where you can see the company employees and the stockholders kind of chiming in and say, oh, well, you should just do this. Okay, sorry about that. That's a bummer. Okay, so let's mute this other one. I'm assuming you guys can hear me now, and I don't know what we missed here. So let's see. Yeah, funny time for technology to fail. Man, let me see whereabouts this happened. Okay. I think it might be my USB hub. Anyways, that really sucks. I should be recording this so we don't miss anything. Whereabouts did I leave off, guys? I think I was talking about aftermarket companies who manufacture brand names and include the logo on them. Hopefully it was somewhere around there. And the short answer is if they don't print the Apple on the battery, they'd probably be fine. But, for whatever reasons, people are... When you switch to YouTube, Lewis. Okay. Oh, geez. Really? So my audio is gone for that long? That sucks. Okay, so I'm going to back up a hair because I think this is important for people to know. When we talk about the source of aftermarket parts, in many cases what happens is manufacturers approach different factories, often in China, because that's where a lot of stuff comes from, and they give them the plans and the information to build a product in order to bid for a contract. So a lot of these companies who make these really good knockoffs, it's because they were being considered to manufacture the original parts at one point in time. They've got the information, the statistics, everything, the design for it. And this is often how we get leaks on phone designs and stuff like that. So they submit their bid along with the prototype, and then the manufacturer gets to decide whether or not they want to use them. If they say no, we've gone with another company, well, obviously there are still a group of factories who have all this information, all this design, all the design plans and everything for the product, so they can come out later and sell this stuff basically out the back door, or on the black market, or however you choose to phrase it. So because we don't really have a legitimate source for OEM parts other than pulling them from working devices, we have to get things where we can, especially when customers are saying, hey, I want the original product. So it's understandable how this situation arose. I applaud Lewis for, everything that he's done to get this information out into the mainstream. That is the main thing. Again, whether people are fighting over it on one side or the other, that's fine. We need to have this conversation. People need to be aware. They need to know that they have options. He may have done a couple things differently, I think, in order to better represent himself, but that's really not really the point here. In any case, what he has done is brought some attention to this, and even this CBC News has done a special where they go inside the Apple Store and they take a MacBook which has a very minor problem with the connector that goes to the display, a simple fix, and they go into the Apple Store, and Apple says this is going to cost you, like $1,000 or $1,000, I think, in Canadian dollars, somewhere in that vicinity, to repair, because it's got liquid damage, and we have to basically replace everything on the inside of the machine. And later on, they decline the repair. They end up going to Lewis's shop and saying, hey, how much does it cost to fix this thing? He opens it up, and there's a single pin, kind of like the one that you saw at the beginning of this video where the connector goes onto the board, except these are not actually soldered in place. They're attached to the end of a cable that plugs into a socket. Well, there's one pin that's bent out of position. He takes like 2 minutes to bend it back, plugs it in, everything's working again, and states that if a customer wanted a more robust repair, the correct thing to do would be to replace the entire connector, which will cost them $75 to $150 roughly. Now, this is after they go to Apple, and Apple says this is going to cost you like $1,000 to replace the components that are affected by this. So obviously, unless you are so concerned about having an OEM repair performed, you're probably not going to choose that expensive option, right? And the sad thing about this is that when we go back to what Lewis was talking about on his channel, he was discussing a laptop that Apple will not repair. So you cannot go to the Apple Store and get a battery replaced on your laptop. Apple considers this thing, what was the word they called it? I want to say legacy device or something like that. It's too old to fix. We don't service them anymore. Buy another laptop, or keep it plugged in, I guess, while you're using it, and that's all we can do for you. But these batteries are still being manufactured, batteries that will fit this device, and if you can find them, you can install it, and you can bring this thing, you can get battery life like you had when you first bought your laptop, instead of having to upgrade and spend $2,000 every few years when your MacBook dies, which is unfortunate. So this is called forced obsolescency. Yes, and there is a huge motivation for corporations to do this, especially when you're someone like Apple, who has reached a point of saturation on the market where they're wondering where their customers are going to come from next. So a lot, I wouldn't say all, but the majority of people who want to have an iPhone have an iPhone. So what do you do now? Because an iPhone could theoretically last a customer many years to come. So could a laptop. So for that reason, how do we make more money? This is the position of the company. We have this device. It could last several years. What else can we sell the customer? Because every company's goal is to continue to grow and to continue to make more money. And once everybody's dropped $5 or $7 or $1,000 on their iPhone, it's not likely they're going to be motivated to buy another one next year unless they can get some sort of value out of the last one. And as time goes on, these things tend to depreciate for reasons like depleted battery lifespan, updates on the software that make the processor run slower, and so on. Not to mention that some of the craftsmanship on the inside of these things is lacking, and there are design flaws that cause things like bend gate and antenna gate and all these other problems that these devices have. So rather than fixing the problem, the solution is come in and buy a new one, and we're going to be good for the environment and do I don't know what with them. I want to get to that in a second too. So I'm happy that he came out and made this video. These guys went in and exposed it really to a mainstream media outlet, which is what we need to see. And Lewis was on the front page of Reddit the other day, And I think it's not the first time that he has been, so that's great. And again, if you go into the comment section in those forums and look, and you'll see who people that feel they're being taken advantage are is the way I want to put it. And then you'll see what would fall into one of two categories. People who have a personal stake or interest in the success of a corporation, or people who are so invested into that ecosystem that it makes sense for them to defend the company's position. And this is the thing that really blows my mind when we talk about consumerism in general and brand loyalty. There is a phenomena that happens when you spend a lot of money. So if you go out and buy a $1,000 phone, it is human nature to react negatively to anyone who criticizes the product that you own because you have such a huge investment in it. And I think this is such a huge part of the fanboy effect. It is, you've sunk a bunch of money into something. If someone comes along and tells you, hey, that's garbage, well, obviously you're not very smart because you made a huge mistake. So your knee-jerk reaction has to be to rationalize a reason why what you bought is worth what you spent on it, right? Kind of makes sense. Let's see. Time to invest in moisture detection stickers. Imagine if automakers prosecute people for overhauling their vintage cars. Also, why the auto parts market have so very different rules regarding aftermarket parts. Well, I can answer that one, Johnny Chang. There is a law called the Magnuson-Moss Act, and I want to say it happened back in 1975, and this was in fact on my list of things to talk about today. So what happens is the legal process moves at a slow and steady pace in most cases, whereas technology moves quite rapidly, and we see it moving faster and faster all the time, right? So at one point in time, automobiles were considered a luxury. And if someone was to say that, hey, I should have the right for someone to come and fix my yacht or my Lear jet, my private plane when it breaks down, most people would kind of say, yeah, right, good luck, figure it out. You've got the money to buy it, right? And I suspect that at some point in time, people look at automobiles and said, well, if you got a problem, take it to the manufacturer. It's their car. You bought it from them. You made the decision to buy it. That's you got to deal with what they have available, and they have no obligation to facilitate third-party repair to that vehicle, right? In the beginning. But as time progressed, we started to become dependent on automobiles, and a few people spoke up and said, look, we have to have transportation. A lot of us need transportation in order to earn a living. So if you want to be able to contribute to society, you need to have access to alternative methods for repair that won't A, cost you an arm and a leg, B, be completely inconvenient if you're not located close to a dealer that can perform the repair for you, and many other reasons that fall into those categories of it is not realistic for everyone to take their car to the manufacturer for repair. Not to mention the fact that, as I started to say, probably before my audio cut out, in many cases, not all, in many cases, manufacturers give an incentive to their mechanics to upsell you to services that you really don't need. So with that in mind, you can see how a lot of people said, I cannot afford to go to the dealership because they only use OEM parts, which I'm sure they do. But they also charge a premium for their labor, and they will often recommend that you replace components that don't need to be fixed in the first place. So over time, people saw this. Legislation was brought forward. It was voted on. They said, you know what? You can't do that. You have to allow people to perform their own repairs or have a third-party mechanic who is qualified, whether it's ASE certified or whatever it is. They need to have access to the information and the equipment required to perform these repairs. This is back in 1975, right? Well, if you were to go back 10 years or 15 years in the past and look at cell phones, a lot of people would have said this is a luxury. You don't need to have a phone in your car. You don't need to have a phone in your pocket, right? 50 years ago, they probably would have questioned whether you need to have a phone in your house or not. So as we progress and as we start to become more reliant on newer technologies, it takes a while for the legal system to catch up with this. And a lot of people who are involved in the legislative process did not grow up with a smartphone in their hand. They came from an era in time where something like that certainly would have been at the very least thought of as a futuristic device that will be reserved for the very wealthy who can afford that kind of stuff. Whereas, hey, look, it's 2018. We need this stuff. We need it to work. We need to have realistic alternatives when it comes to repair and maintenance. We should not have to be dependent on a manufacturer. And if you look at it from the manufacturer's side, they stand to make a lot more money if they can keep tight controls over your repair options. So I believe that this is the core of this entire controversy. You know, the manufacturer wants to make money. People should have a right not to be ripped off. And when I say that, a lot of the responses I get are, well, you can always vote with your wallet. You know, if you don't like what they're doing, don't buy their products. Well, if you get to a certain point where you're so huge that you can manipulate any type of market that is available to people, then we typically will introduce some sort of regulation that says that's not okay. If you have monopolized an industry, whether you're an ISP or a phone manufacturer or anyone else, you know, if you have so much control over something, a utility company, right? If you have an electric service coming into your house and there's only one provider in your area, they are heavily regulated because that is the only thing that's going to keep them from exploiting their customers. And with a company like Apple, who is growing or has grown as fast as they have, if they have locked people into an ecosystem, including a lot of people who are required by their employers to use an iPhone or a tablet that's made by Apple, or, you know, whatever company or operating system it may be, now you're putting people's livelihood at stake when you say, well, you don't have to choose that product. Well, maybe you do. Maybe in order to be involved in whatever it is that you do for a living, you need to use that particular product because it's become so widespread. So this is where companies like Apple and Samsung and anyone else should start wondering, are we going to have to worry about being regulated? Are we going to have to worry about laws being passed that say that we have to be forthcoming with our customers and tell them what their options are, even if that includes us not making money on the deal? And I'm sure that's one of the reasons that Apple has, you know, by accident or not, has sort of been so good about creating brand loyalty and by securing their ecosystem with an operating system. So instead of just making the equipment, by building their own operating system and by making it impossible to install any other type of third-party software without their permission, they have basically monopolized their product to a point where there's not a whole lot you can do with it unless they allow you to. Okay, so I might upgrade my Note 4 or 5G. Calling someone geniuses influences public into thinking that the people behind the counter cannot be misleading them, must know what it is happening. And this is another point, Greg, I'm glad you brought up, because I wanted to talk about this. For one, in this video and in real life, if you've never been there before, sometimes you go to the Apple store and they'll quote you a ridiculous price for a repair that should be very simple. Now, why, you know, outside of greed, and I want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, including Apple. So outside of profit, why would Apple tell you that it's ridiculously expensive to fix this machine and really your best option is to replace it? And I believe that the simple answer to that is that it is not practical for Apple to train their geniuses or their techs or whatever you want to call the people that work in the back of the store replacing screens and batteries. It is not practical to train them to a level where most of us who are doing advanced level repairs, you know, even remotely to get into that area. You know, as Michael pointed out here, he's talking about learning how to replace connectors on an iPhone. Imagine going to Apple and asking them if anyone in the building could replace a connector on an iPhone 7. Imagine asking them if they could replace just the front-facing camera, not the whole screen pre-assembled, but just a front-facing camera into your iPhone. And I think in most cases, the answer is going to be no. Now, if they did, if they had those skills and capabilities, they probably wouldn't be working for Apple. They probably would open up their own independent shop and be making money on this deal like a lot of us have. And I got to say, a lot of people will say, hey, do you have something against Apple? And I said, well, I may not like their business model and I don't like their practices, but I got to admit, if it wasn't for Apple, I would have lost a lot of my income because the problems that come to me are things that Apple can't solve. People have gone to the store and they've been presented with an option like, well, just replace the whole device. And they say, well, I want my information off the device. Can you get that for me? And once they say no, or no, we're not willing to go to that level of repair, we just swap things out. You know, you got a bad spark plug, you need a new engine. That kind of kills the deal for them, and that's why we end up working on people's phones. And when something new comes out and they want $250, $300 to replace a screen, and we can do it for $100, you know, well, obviously some people are going to say, I insist on having the Apple Store do the repair for me. But there are quite a few other people out there, and as their customer base grows, I believe this percentage increases. A lot more realistic for them, for people who don't have all the money in the world and already dropped $1,000 on a phone, is to find a cheaper alternative. You know, find someone that can do this more for what it's worth than trying to upsell you into, you know, some ridiculous repair or replacement unit, which doesn't make sense for anyone really, except for the company that's selling it. That's my opinion. Tesla voids your warranty if you work on your car. Yeah, that's another one. I think that we're going to see this same issue coming up, and I'm not sure how Tesla is going to approach it because they do technically fall into the category of automobiles. I wonder if because they're electric vehicles, there are going to be some exceptions to that. I don't know. But according to the Magnuson-Moss Act, you should not have a voided warranty on your Tesla. I don't think, again, I'm not a lawyer, we should ask one, but I don't think that it's illegal for them to void your warranty just because you work on it. It doesn't make sense. Why does Europe, Australia, and other countries, why don't Europe, Australia, and other countries allow people to do this, Apple to do this, but in USA it's different, government looking after Apple as a USA company? I can't say for sure, Wayne, but I will say that a lot of strange things are going on in the U.S. They have been for a long time, but they're certainly as much now as ever before, where we have this strange system of government where huge corporations are allowed to donate money to campaign efforts. So, you know, if that made any sense, which I don't think that it does, on top of that, they are also able to pay people to go and lobby their representatives and say, hey, I want to take you to lunch. Will you vote for this? We're going to donate this. We'll give you that. You know, so there's, long story short, there's a lot of money that comes from private corporations that goes to people who vote to make these laws that we have in place. And I would hope that things are different in Australia, Europe, and the rest of the world, because while in its purest form, at some point it made sense from a capitalistic perspective, but eventually if any one company gets too big, you can see the potential for problems here. And this is something that we went through back in, I want to say it was the 70s, where the Bell companies went in and bought up every single long distance company there was and started to fix the prices. And the FCC, I think it was the FCC or the FTC, came in and said, you can't do that. You know, you can't own every option that people have, because then it becomes a monopoly. And they went and they broke up all these long distance companies when we had to pay for long distance so that we could have competition in the marketplace. And this is something that I believe Apple should be concerned about regardless. You know, the current political climate here really, in my amateurish opinion, kind of favors big companies. And I hope that this is a temporary thing. You know, I'm all for growth. I hope that big companies can make great products that will make people happy. But in the long term, we need to have some protection for consumers. And seizing people's property as it's being shipped in, okay, fair enough. And again, I'm trying to maintain a neutral perspective here. I think that if I ordered some batteries from China and they had an Apple stamped on them and Apple owns that trademark and they get confiscated, I would not be happy about it. But I would certainly think that it would be a better option to try to buy batteries that aren't marked with a trademark that's owned by an American corporation. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And I would assume that these guys in China who are making this stuff just say, hey, we want it to look just like the original so everybody's happy. Well, you know, if you get your stuff seized by customs, you're not going to be too happy about it. By the way, if you want to become wealthy and you have the capital to invest, someone start a third-party battery manufacturing company that makes replacement batteries for not just Apple, but every other device on the market, and make them high quality so that they last Don't stamp them with some with some original logo. Put your own thing on there, and you'll make tons of money because there is a need for that. I mean, we know when we do repairs on iPhones and MacBooks and anything else, getting a hold of good batteries is not always an easy thing to do. There's a lot of garbage out there on the market. So if someone came through with a high quality replacement battery, you could charge the same amount that you do for an OEM as long as you have the same type of quality control and the lifespan that we get from OEMs. If you can make one better, just imagine you'd be rich either way. And who can deny the main role that has a digital communications in today's lifestyle? Yeah, Johnny, that was my point. A long time ago, a cell phone was just kind of like, oh, look at me, I have a cell phone. Aren't I cool? Who am I going to call? Because nobody else has a cell phone. But nowadays, it's so important that we literally have a program for people who cannot afford to get a phone to get a hold of one. Because if there is a disaster, emergency, medical or otherwise, we have the technology available to us to save lives, to help people, to report a fire or a drunk driver or whatever it happens to be. You pick up your phone, you press a button, and you can contact people who can help. To say that is not a necessity in today's day and age, I don't think is being realistic. All the other stuff aside, where people rely on this to make a living, to have income. If you can't stay connected nowadays, imagine going to apply for a job and you tell a prospective employer that they can call your home phone and get your answering machine, but you don't have a cell phone. Good luck getting a job, because I can tell you I would have a hard time myself hiring someone like that. Someone that you couldn't send a text message to, that you couldn't install some sort of application on their phone for them to use your work's email system or any other proprietary software that you might have. I mean, it's just nuts to act like this isn't something that people need nowadays. Also, with the net neutrality thing repealed, who knows what will happen with the affordable subsidized cell phone deals as the Assurance Wireless. Yeah, that's a good question, Johnny, and I have a feeling that we'll probably see things go back and forth a bit depending on what happens, especially on this next election that's coming up in November. So everyone, please remember, you're probably sick of hearing it by now, but if you care about laws that affect you, and they all do, make sure you register to vote. That's coming up in like 2 weeks. So I hope that you'll all be able to say that you voted, and tell people that you know about this stuff too. Yeah, Mike, you making money fixing Apple products, but what happens if all China Apple parts are banned? That's a good question, Wayne. I suspect that the cost of repairs may go up. And there's another thing that's happening right now, if you weren't aware, especially for those of you who are outside the US. We have a trade agreement with China that, long story short, allows them to ship merchandise from China to the US without any postage fees. Okay, so think about that one for a second. I can order anything, I can order one of these from China. I can have it sent to my house, and all the manufacturer in China has to worry about is getting it out of China, and the rest of the delivery fees, at least by the time it gets to the US, are paid for by the US Post Office if they use I think it's China Mail or something like that. So we have an agreement where we said we want to import things, and we are going to pick up the tab when it comes to delivering them to people in the US by the United States Postal Department. I don't know that is really a fair arrangement, because it does flood the market. And you're going to hear, I'm talking about things that benefit me, okay? So I want to make it clear that I'm trying to look at this as objectively as I possibly can. This would affect me. If I suddenly had to pay an extra $3 or $4 every time I ordered one of these, that would cost me more money. And at the same time, looking at this from the perspective of the national economy, obviously it is going to hurt people who are manufacturing and trying to sell things here in the US when they have to pay shipping fees, but exporters from China don't have to worry about that. Now, even though I'm not sure that's completely fair, it certainly benefits me. However, there's a good chance that is going to be going away very soon. And when that happens, and when we can't get Chinese merchandise shipped over here that has original logos, for the same price that we're getting them right now, my assumption is that the cost of repairs has to go up. And even if we said, well, why don't we just start manufacturing that stuff here? Don't put a trademark logo on it. We buy it from someone in the US. We don't have to worry about shipping, etc., and so on. We can help the economy. Well, you can bet our minimum wage is going to be significantly higher than what they're paying people in China or the Czech Republic or India or anywhere, Mexico, anywhere else the manufacturing typically takes place for these things. That number is going to go up. So that means we are going to pay more for that stuff. Now, at the same time, here's my question. Will we have a special carve out so that large corporations are able to import these things the same way they've been doing the whole time, but only we as third-party repair facilities will have to pay the extra money to get them? This is the only thing that concerns me, Wayne, because if they said, look, everything that comes from China is going to cost everybody more money, well, then it is what it is. We have to pay more for it. Apple has to pay more for it. Wherever you go, the price is going to go up proportionately, right? However, if these big companies say, well, we figured out a way where we can get the stuff cheap, but nobody else can, and they have to pay more for it, that's when we have to start to worry, because it's going to be more difficult for us to be competitive in many cases when the customer is weighing their alternatives for repair between us and whatever company that they're used to dealing with. Original phone coming from China is legal, but not third-party parts coming from China. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So, excuse me, as I get behind in the comments, it's funny because I'm thinking exactly the same thing you're saying here. They are treating the copyright thing as the war on drugs. They are punishing the middleman as if they are the only culprit while doing nothing to the big cartels such as Apple, or helping with the end users or consumers. Apple owners consider owning an iPhone makes them elite. Everyone else believes just can't afford an iPhone. You know what's funny about that? I heard someone talking about how you may be judged if you send a text message to someone and you don't have a green bubble on it, because apparently if you're using iMessage, your phone displays a different type of text message on another person's phone if they happen to have an iPhone. And this is the funniest thing I've heard for a long time, because as you all probably know, I've been using this iPhone for, I don't know, quite a while. I've been using iPhones for at least a good year now. And I always shut iMessage off. Like, I go in and I disable that option because I don't like the way that iMessage works. I don't like that when I switch SIM cards from one phone to another, I might miss a message or it's going to pop up on my computer or something else goofy like that. And now I have one more reason to shut it off, because I really don't want to tell everybody, hey, I'm using an iPhone. Like, I am not here to advertise for you for free any more than I'd like to cover up this porthole, because that's another example of free advertising right there. They should be sending me a check. Let's see. Is it paid by USPS or China Post? Greg, that is actually somehow funded by the United States. That is my understanding. So it's not China Post. China Post has to get the merchandise out of China. Again, don't quote me on this, but the way I understand it is once it gets to port here in the U.S., from there, the USPS or some other organization that's funded by tax money gets to pay for the delivery to wherever that shipment is going. So they don't pay the postage ground here. USA should have compulsory voting as we do in Australia. You can't complain if you have to vote. You have had your say. I agree. You know, compulsory, it certainly should be easier than it is. Voting sounds like, you know, you just drive down the street and you take care of it. And that's obviously not the easiest thing in the world for everyone to do. So it would be nice if they could make it easier. I always thought, hey, with all this technology available, you should be able to vote from home, right? But then we hear about all this hacking stuff going on, and that would certainly be a concern, because if someone figured out a way to hack the voting system, well, we'd probably be in the same situation we are now, but that would be a reason for concern. But I agree, it should certainly be easier. And if you didn't know, in many states, and I believe California is one of them, you are entitled to 2 hours of paid leave from your job on election day. So check with your local laws wherever you are. There's a good chance that your employer has to let you have 2 hours off either at the beginning or the end of your shift in order to go and vote on election days. And I think that's, you know, at least a step in the right direction, but we certainly should have a way to encourage people to vote. And yeah, if you're complaining about it and you didn't vote, that's unfortunate. I'm not saying you don't have a right to complain, but why didn't you go out and say something about it, right? The main problem is that China has access to precious metal mines. Even if we could still produce products in the U.S., we'd still have to import raw materials. Good point. And everyone's scrambling to get what's left in the Congo of the cobalt mines at this point, which is another reason why we need to get away from lithium-ion batteries as soon as possible. Not to mention the fact that they're really not that stable and you're kind of carrying an explosive in your back pocket or wherever your phone happens to be. I think front pocket might be even worse. Already does a few months ago sales tax 10% on everything, AliExpress, eBay. Oh, okay, so they've actually increased the import tax to Australia, it sounds like. As things going currently, will repair business go the way of the recycle business? Let's say you ship your device broken to China for it to be repaired, and while it's done, it's sent back. Okay, so Johnny, it's interesting. It's like you're reading my script here. One of the other things that I thought was interesting is that a lot of times customers will go to Apple and request a repair, and unless it's a screen replacement or a battery replacement or something pretty simple, like a real bonehead kind of repair, they'll tell you that your device cannot be repaired. It has to be swapped out. There's no way for them to fix it, and so forth. And yet, at the same time, Apple, Greg, has started selling refurbished 2018 MacBook Pros in Canada. So my question is this: if these devices weren't repairable when they were brought into the Apple Store, then where are they getting the refurbished units from? Obviously, they got some somewhere. I mean, it's not like Apple says, hey, we'll buy your laptop, right? It's usually you come in, you have a problem, and they say, hey, we'll allow you, I imagine it works the way that phones do, we'll allow you to pay this much more to get a replacement unit, we'll take the old one off your hands, and now they're going to go ahead and fix it and then sell it to you. And if you've watched some of Jessa Jones' channel, you should be strongly discouraged from buying anything that's refurbished from Apple. I want to say she has on more than one occasion taken apart refurbished replacement units from Apple that had, I think one of them had liquid damage inside of it, if I remember correctly, on an iPad. And there was another one that, you look at the inside of these things and you wonder who is doing the refurbishing work on these. In any case, you can now buy refurbished laptops, which, let's see, a 15-inch MacBook Pro priced at $379. I suppose if you want to take your chances at that price point, it's not terrible. That seems pretty cheap. $379. Oh, wait, no, that's for AppleCare. AppleCare Plus for the 15-inch MacBook Pro is $379. Are you joking? Isn't that like at least 25% of the cost of the whole device? Wow. Okay. Yeah, so anyways, good luck with that. If you buy one of these and it breaks, I would also like to know what the warranty period is on a refurbished device. Very curious. So let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. Yeah, so the thing is, what's likely happening is that Apple realizes that they can fix these devices, but there's no way they can have technicians in every store to handle the amount of traffic that's coming in and requesting the types of repairs that they're getting done probably in China when these things get sent back and refurbished. So a long time ago, before Apple was really even a thing, a lot of private individuals realized that there is a need for phone repair, there's a need for laptop repair. Let's get into this. Let's give consumers a great option. Let's do good work. Let's keep these things out of landfills. Let's help people to extend the lifetimes of their devices. And when you're pushing $1,000 and $1,200 and $1,500 phones, the question here is this, and a lot of people talk about this planned obsolescence. I get it. That's the idea, to make this thing last a year or two. Here's the problem, and here's, I think, the biggest thing that we have going in our favor when we talk about how to convince people that they shouldn't just say, okay, let's all bow down to Apple and do whatever they tell us. And that's this. Look at the price point on your device. If Apple was selling a $200 phone and in a year and a half it was worthless and you needed to buy another one, that would be one thing. That would be fine. By a lot of people, they'd say, well, it's time for me to re-up. I can work this into my financing. No problem. $10 a month, whatever. We'll get another one. But when you're selling a $1,000 phone and in a year to a year and a half, people start having problems with it and it's not repairable, then we have a problem and we have some ammunition to use to say, look, this is not okay. It's not okay to tell people just get used to dropping $1,000 every other year on a phone. That doesn't make sense. On a phone, a cell phone. So I hope that people will react. What's the word I want to use here? reasonably to this being put into the spotlight, and again, congrats to Lewis. I'm glad that he was able to kind of get this in front of a lot of people's eyes. It's on different news outlets, channels, and this is, again, one of the things that we never see in mainstream media, because all of these advertisers get money from these big corporations. So for them to come out and say, hey, these guys are full of it, well, that's going to be a problem for them if they want those advertising dollars. So at least for now, we have YouTube as a platform to spread information. I hope this doesn't become any more tightly controlled by advertisers than it already is. But for the time being, let's keep talking about it. Let's see. I know Canada Post, when they are not on rotating strikes, places incoming shipments from China via China Post low on the scale of clearing the shipments through Canada Customs can take months. Wow, that sucks. Voting booths everywhere here. All schools are turned into voting centers on election day, or you can do a postal vote if you want. Voting here takes 5 minutes. That's great for Australia, Wayne. I wish we had something as easy. Let's see. Sell them to the U.S. Yeah, exactly. Venezuela is getting mortgaged and pawned for cheap as they are offering their mineral ores for cheap to repay their debts and ask for more loans. Wow. Those are $1,200 MacBooks that Apple took in after getting people to agree to buy a new one. Yes, of course. What warranty does Apple give on MacBooks in the USA? To the best of my knowledge, Wayne, that's a 1-year warranty on a new device. Now, I don't know when it comes to the refurbished units. I know at one point in time, if you swapped your iPhone out under warranty, that they would change the original warranty to, I want to say it was 60 days. So I knew someone who had an iPhone that was malfunctioning. They had had it for like 3 months or something like that, and normally would have had a remaining 9 months of warranty left on it. Went in and insisted that they swap it out because they just kept, first time they were telling them, well, there's nothing wrong with it. And then they experienced this intermittent problem later on. And eventually they were able to exchange the phone. And as I recall, they were told that the warranty period for the refurbished device was 60 days. I don't know if that's still the case. I would suspect that they're not going to give you a refurbished item that's going to be warranted for a year. Maybe they do. I'm not sure about that. If I recall, it was Samsung that spearheaded about a disposable cell phone way back about 15 years ago. It cost them $30 and wasn't rechargeable, just like the disposable cameras sold at the pharmacies. Yeah, and guys, I think this is what we're looking at is, one of the best things that we have going for us is that a lot of these companies want this stuff to be disposable, but because of the price point, you're going to have a difficult time convincing any sane person that you're going to spend $1,000 on something that needs to be disposed of or replaced in a year and a half. I mean, that's hard for a lot of people to get used to, at least me. Under Australian consumer law, Apple can't offer 12 months. Is it 3 years now? Because I thought it was 2. If they're offering 3 years, wow, congratulations to Australia. Yeah, we should be doing something like that here. Again, there's a lot of politics that goes into this type of stuff, because we do want to encourage innovation. We do want to encourage capitalism. We do want people to work and to promote and to create new cool things, that are useful to society. And at the same time, the fact that they're allowed to influence a lot of the laws that should be protecting consumers, that seems, clearly that would be a conflict, but that's kind of the way the system works here at the moment anyways. So let's see, what else do we have? We had this video here. Was this the one I wanted to show you here? No, it wasn't. There was a comment section on one of these that was just really amazing to me. I think you guys will laugh if you hear, and you can really tell who's who on here. So if you weren't already familiar with the story, Lewis Rossman has objected to the seizure of original batteries worth $1,000 by U.S. Customs. He made a video talking about it. I've linked that down in the video description. You should absolutely watch it. I actually linked something else down here. I think it was his channel. Oh no, it was the other video on CBC. So he talks about how he's got an Apple stamped on it, and I think that the only really unfortunate thing about this article is that someone pointed out that in Lewis's posting history, I believe it was on Reddit, and again, don't quote me on this is from memory, but I think what they said is that he had stated at some point that he didn't care if they were counterfeit or not. He wished that the manufacturer had crossed out the Apple with a Sharpie. And obviously that doesn't sound good. I think the real answer is don't manufacture the battery with an Apple stamped on it, even though I think it's ridiculous that a battery, which no one is going to see once it's installed in the device, how can you claim that you have a trademark on something that the customer can never visibly identify? Well, whatever, that's the way the law works. There's an Apple stamped on it. They shouldn't have stamped the Apple on there in the first place. I don't think that writing over it with the Sharpie, if that's what he actually said, I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is don't print the Apple on it. Then they have no case. There's nothing they can do to confiscate your merchandise. I mean, we've been aware of this for years. Apple has gone into stores that sell replacement parts and they've shut them down. And the FBI has been involved in this stuff because people do something as simple as making a iPhone 4S back that has an Apple stamped on it. Don't do that. You don't have to. You don't need to stamp that trademark on there. It doesn't make any sense. But if you go down here into the where's the comment section on this thing? Here we go. Go down here into the comments, and you can see who the fanboys are. It's entertaining, really. How about this guy right here? Magman1979. What a sad, pathetic little YouTubing troll. Spend $50,000 to get $1,000 of battery. Dude, you have issues. Not to mention an oversized tinfoil hat if you think Apple conspired with U.S. border agents to seize batteries because of your stupid CBC rant, which doesn't do anyone any favors. Well, maybe not, but why are you so upset about it? Well, look, he's got an Apple as his avatar, so that would kind of explain it, right? Never heard of him, and I'm okay with that. Well, you don't watch YouTube or pay attention to the news, do you? And this is kind of funny. This is how I feel about Apple's repair policy and general strategy of creating an ecosystem based on serfdom. With each passing moment, you make yourself more my servant. I think that's fairly accurate. And then, of course, somebody replied here to that comment, you win for most ignorant comment of the day. Congratulations. So talk about polarizing here. It's the same guy. Shocker. It's Magman1979. Okay. He's got 1,000 posts on the Apple Insider Forum. So he's obviously interested in Apple for whatever reason. So it kind of goes on. And for the most part, the reactions that I've seen are not pro-Apple, but you have a lot of people who are rushing to their defense, which is not a huge surprise. It happens. Let's see. Wayne Taylor, coincidence that they hit him just after the news article came out? Maybe not. I'm kind of curious about that too. Did Apple really watch Lewis talking about stuff like this and then decide to go after him? It's hard to say. Are they capable of singling out someone? Can they just kind of send an anonymous tip or a non-anonymous tip to customs and say, hey, watch out for this guy. We think he's importing trademarked goods. I don't know. That's a good question. It's entirely possible. I know that they did the same thing to Jessa a while back. Louis Vuitton syndrome. Logo won't stop Apple. If they can show it's a copy of their product, it's still a copyright violation. Even if you make an aftermarket battery, like that doesn't have anything stamped on it, is that legal? Maybe it is. China should start covering Apple's logo with warranty stickers. That's probably an idea, Harvey, but I think that would be easy enough for someone to peel them back. And secondly, why do we have to have an Apple logo on a battery in the first place? I mean, I know that some people get attached to seeing an Apple on the back of their phone. That's one thing. Good thing for us, they're not on the screen. But when it comes to the battery, the customer's really not going to see that. So I don't understand why it's so important to print the logo on there. Those are millennial trolls, indeed. 1,000 posts of useless information towing the Apple line. Yeah, pretty much. So that's what I saw too. And again, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I'm happy. Why am I saying that? I hate that saying it is what it is. This is what it is. This is what's happening. Here's what you can do. Contact repair.org. Check out their website and talk to your politicians. Talk to your congresspeople. I know it's kind of a headache, but they have phone numbers, and my understanding is that making a phone call is much more effective than sending an email. Some of them will be deaf to your requests, but you know what? If they want your vote, whoever's answering the phone needs to listen and hopefully pass this information on. So I don't know what's going to happen, but here's the good news. If you repair phones for a living, and this is a question that I get a lot, I think I'm due to recreate a video about getting into phone repair. I did one. It's almost been 2 years, I think, about getting into the phone repair business, because I still get a lot of the same questions on my channel. Is it a good time to get into phone repair? Is all this stuff going to go away? Our manufacturer is going to put us out of business. Is the sky in fact falling? Well, theoretically, anything is possible, right? There could come a point in time where you cannot repair iPhones anymore, where maybe they build some technology into the screen so that it's matched to the motherboard and there's no way we can replace the screen. That is possible. Hasn't happened yet. I have a feeling if Apple had their way, that might happen. I mean, we don't know. Every year we kind of breathe a sigh of relief when we realize that yes, we still can repair their goods, their products. It almost looks more like Samsung might be the one that does that when they build this new in-display fingerprint sensor. I hope that that's all built into the motherboard and not into the display itself. At the same time, in my experience, a lot of customers don't want to spend the money that it requires in order to get a replacement screen for their Galaxy phone. So would it be that big of a loss? Maybe not. If Apple does it, here's the way I look at it. If you are able to carry out higher level, or let's say even mid-level phone repairs, so you've gone beyond just replacing a screen, so you can do more than what the Apple Store can do, which isn't saying a lot. It doesn't take a lot to get there. You can get to the point where you can perform repairs more complex than any Apple technician that works in their stores. You could be up to speed in a week. Okay, it's that easy. Apple chooses not to service a lot of the repair requests that their customers have. So one of two things happens. A, they make it possible, or we get this right to repair legislation passed in at least one state, because that's what it takes for the floodgates to kind of break open everywhere else. So either that happens and we have access to these materials that we need, or we don't. And if Apple makes it so that your only option is to go to them for any type of repair, I believe that two things will happen. One, a lot of people are going to get turned off to the idea of owning an Apple product. Now that won't be everybody, and I'm sure they'll do their best to provide, the most convenient option that they possibly can, which still isn't going to be great for most people, but it'll be something. The other thing is this. If you've experienced any amount of success in the phone repair or electronics repair industry, there are a lot of other things you're going to be able to work on. And I look at this as part of a learning process. If you've mastered or you've at least become proficient in phone repair, you're the type of person who can do a whole lot of other stuff. So I always tell people, it's never too soon to diversify. We should be looking at other things like tablets and drones and laptops and anything else that's electronic that you can possibly think of, because if and when the time comes that we can't fix iPhones, we should be able to say, well, that too bad for Apple, because now people are going to be upset with them because they don't have a realistic option for a lot of people. You have to make an appointment, you have to wait in line, you have to spend $750 on a repair that should cost you $75. And meanwhile, we will be concentrating on other things that can more realistically or practically be repaired, and that could go far beyond electronics. Once you get the mechanical, if you have the mechanical aptitude to do phone repairs, there's a lot of other stuff in the world that you can do, and I have a confidence that you will find another way to make money. So I don't think it's time for anyone to panic because Apple's doing something or Samsung's doing something or whatever else it is, especially with this price point they have associated with their devices. You're going to have a hard time selling someone a $1,000 phone if the only way they can fix anything is to go to you and spend a ridiculous amount of money on it. That's my prediction. We shall see. There you go. Car stereo repair. That's another one. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do. I think people feel like maybe phone repair is this thing where you learn how to do one thing and that's it. And if that goes away, you're done. And if that's the way you're looking at this, then I would be concerned as well. This isn't like going to school, getting a degree, and you practice one type of profession and you do the same thing every day forever. And not too many occupations are like that anymore. We have to be able to innovate. We have to be able to come up with other ways to help people and to make money. So I have a lot of confidence that people are able to do that. Hey, John Cassidy, how are you? I was actually just about to sign off, but welcome to the stream. If you weren't here earlier, I hope you'll go back. Guys, I'm going to go edit this thing because there's a big chunk of it where my audio is gone, which is disappointing because I thought today was kind of an important topic. So I may re-edit this video completely. Having a Galaxy Tab S3 digitizer screen here is $250 Australian at Samsung authorized repair center. The screens to buy aftermarket cost me $400 plus. Wow. Why the smart devices ecosystem doesn't emulate the boutique PC market? I don't know, Johnny. Using company logo, one violation, but if you copy the product, it is two. You think Apple wouldn't seize aftermarket MacBook keyboards with no logo? I bet they would. They might, and I hope that I think that there would be a good case for creating aftermarket parts that don't have a company logo on them and taking that to court, because we can buy aftermarket parts for just about anything. And just because it's compatible with the device, if that makes it illegal, well, then we're all in trouble, because that means you have to buy everything from the manufacturer, and that's just not a realistic option for most people. You know, if your car battery goes out, I certainly wouldn't go to the manufacturer to buy a replacement, unless they want to give me a 5-year. I'll take it back on that one, because they do give you a 5-year warranty, but it's prorated, which means it won't last 5 years anyways. So anyways, I got to get back to work, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back on Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Again, next Monday at 2. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll talk to you later.